Midnight has a sound most people never notice, a quiet pressure, a subtle tightening, a heaviness that doesn't feel like night, but like something watching the night. Remember the first time I learned why witches prefer this hour? Not because it's dark, but because you are. Not morally, energetically. Midnight is the moment your guard slips, your emotions soften, your mind becomes porous. It's when your spirit whispers instead of shouts. And for people who want to interfere with your prayers, that silence is the perfect doorway. If you've ever wondered why the moment you decide to pray, something shifts, the air thickens, your thoughts scatter, your chest feels tight, it's not weakness. It's timing. Midnight is spiritually powerful because it magnifies whatever state you're in. Hope becomes sharper. Fear becomes louder. Prayer becomes stronger. Distraction becomes deadlier. That's why witches avoid fighting you at noon. Noon is conscious. Midnight is subconscious. And the subconscious is easier to hijack. People think spiritual interference is dramatic, shadows, curses, obvious attacks. But the real war is subtle, an intrusive memory resurfacing just as you kneel, a sudden exhaustion that wasn't there 5 minutes ago, the urge to scroll your phone just for a second, the feeling that your prayer is pointless tonight, so you may as well try tomorrow. These aren't coincidences. They're engineered moments designed to reroute your focus, because if they can redirect your mind, they can redirect your power. I used to sit in darkened rooms with others who practiced this. Our goal wasn't to overpower someone, it was to disorient them. Midnight was simply the easiest doorway. People who feel misunderstood, drained, or spiritually muted at night aren't imagining it. They're sensing a system built to work against them. And when you don't understand the system, you blame yourself for the heaviness that isn't yours. But here's the hidden truth. The fact that you struggle at midnight is proof that something in you is spiritually potent. People who carry no spiritual weight feel nothing. People with a calling, sensitivity, or authority feel everything. That's why the hour feels heavy, not because you're powerless, but because your power peaks there, and here's where the shift begins. Once you understand you've been reacting to a battlefield disguised as fatigue, everything changes. Your prayers aren't weak, they've been intercepted. Your spiritual sensitivity isn't a burden, it's evidence of your significance. Midnight isn't your enemy, it's the hour that reveals who you truly are when the world is asleep. This is the tension they never wanted you to notice, that your exhaustion is targeted, your silence is strategic, and your unanswered prayers weren't unanswered. They were interrupted, but awareness transforms everything. Because the moment you name the pattern, you break the illusion. Midnight becomes less of a fog and more of a signal. The heaviness becomes a cue, the distractions become recognizable, and your prayer becomes focused instead of fractured, and understanding this prepares you for what comes next, the truth about the battle unfolding around you long before you ever sensed it. Most people think spiritual warfare looks dramatic, shadows moving, strange noises, nightmares, curses thrown in the dark. But the truth is far quieter, far more calculated. Witches don't win battles through theatrics. They win by understanding laws you don't even know are being used against you. And once you understand that, the entire story of your unanswered prayers starts to look very different. The first thing I learned inside those circles was this: you don't need to overpower someone spiritually if you can interrupt their alignment. Prayer isn't about volume or length, it's about direction, emotion, and mental clarity. If any of those crack, even slightly, the entire prayer loses momentum. That's why the real battle is psychological long before it becomes spiritual. I still remember my first midnight ritual. Not one designed to empower myself, but one designed to weaken someone else. We weren't chanting spells or summoning anything dramatic. We were targeting a person's focus. Their emotion. Their inner state. All we needed to do was trigger a single emotional shift, anxiety, guilt, a painful memory. Something subtle that would feel like their own thought. And the moment their mind turned inward instead of upward, their prayer lost their sharpness. That's how most interference works. Not through force, but through disruption. This is the part people don't realize. You don't lose spiritual battles because your faith is weak. You lose because your attention is redirected at the exact moment it matters most. Have you ever knelt to pray and suddenly remembered an embarrassing moment from 10 years ago? Or felt a rush of sadness that wasn't there all day? Or had your mind bounce between 10 different worries when all you wanted was one clear thought? That isn't a coincidence. It's not your brain betraying you. It's interference. And once you understand interference, you stop blaming yourself. Because here's the truth they hope you never uncover: your prayer has always been strong enough. Your intention has always been heard. Your spirit has always carried weight. What you were missing wasn't power, it was clarity on the forces working against you. And once that clarity clicks, everything changes. You stop praying like someone trying to be heard and start praying like someone who understands they've been targeted for a reason, because their voice carries impact. What comes next will show you exactly how attackers hijack your focus using one of the most powerful spiritual laws ever weaponized, the law of direction. Every battle begins in the mind, and witches know this better than anyone. The law of direction is simple, brutal, and frighteningly effective. Whatever your mind focuses on at midnight expands. And if they can steer your attention, even by a fraction, they can reroute the entire force of your prayer. That's why the moment you decide to pray, something inside you suddenly feels scattered, foggy, or emotionally loud. It's not a weakness. It's a strategy. The first time I saw this law used, it wasn't in a dark ritual chamber, it was in a small, dim room lit by a single candle. My mentor at the time told me, you don't need to touch their spirit. Touch their direction. Then she pointed to a person's name written on a folded piece of paper. They're about to pray at midnight, she said. All we need to do is nudge their mind toward an emotion that doesn't serve them. And just like that, we sent a wave of irritation toward the person, nothing dramatic, just an emotional itch. Within minutes, that irritation would grow inside their mind, expand through their thoughts, and scatter their intention. By the time they knelt to pray, their heart were in 3 different places. Their words carried no sharpness. Their prayer had no direction. That's how the law works. Have you noticed it yourself? You sit down to pray, and instead of clarity, your mind fires off memories you haven't thought of in years. You suddenly remember a mistake you made. You feel a heaviness that wasn't there all day. You become hyper-aware of small noises, old emotions, unfinished conversations. Your thoughts dart around like someone shook your inner compass. This is the law of direction being used against you. A distracted mind isn't harmless. It's disarmed. Witches exploit this because they know the truth: a misdirected prayer is more dangerous than no prayer at all. When your mind fractures, your intention dilutes. Your spiritual momentum evaporates. And most people never realize that the battle was won before they even open their mouths. But here's the part they don't expect you to learn: this law can be reversed. If your focus determines which spiritual force gains power, then learning to command your direction instantly shifts the battlefield. A wandering mind becomes a sharpened blade. A scattered emotion becomes a laser. A single clear intention can cut through every distraction engineered against you. Think of it like this: your prayer isn't blocked, it's being blinded. Your spirit isn't weak, it's being redirected. Your power isn't missing, it's being scattered. Once you reclaim direction, every interference collapses. And that's why they fear this moment, the moment you finally understand that your midnight struggle isn't random chaos. It's engineered confusion. And if confusion can be engineered, clarity can be commanded. The law of direction stops being a weapon used against you and becomes a force you can wield. But focus is only the first battlefield. To understand the next level of interference, the kind that drains your energy before you even speak, you need to confront the second spiritual law witches use against you, the law of exchange. There is a reason you feel drained before you even start praying, and it has nothing to do with exhaustion or lack of faith. It's the law of exchange. Witches know that emotions are not just feelings, their currencies. And at midnight, when your spiritual defenses are thin, they can trigger an emotional shift that steals your energy and feeds their intention. The first time my mentor showed me this law, she didn't chant, didn't light incense, didn't summon anything. She simply said, "Watch how quickly a heart can be emptied." She closed her eyes, breathed slowly, and targeted someone who always prayed at exactly midnight. Within seconds, she whispered, "They're remembering something painful." And she smiled. Because that memory, that small spark of guilt, was all she needed. That person's prayer collapsed before it began. That's the exchange. Your fear becomes their fuel. Your guilt becomes their leverage. Your emotional drop becomes their spiritual rise. This is how your energy gets siphoned without you noticing. That sudden sadness out of nowhere? That tightness in your chest right before you kneel? That memory you haven't revisited in years suddenly resurfaces? None of that is accidental. It's an engineered emotional exchange, a subtle rewiring of your state so your spirit has nothing left to stand on. Because prayer is not just words, it's emotional voltage. Whoever controls the emotional charge controls the outcome. Witches exploit this by triggering emotions that weaken you while strengthening themselves. They don't need you to break down. They just need you slightly off-center, a shade more tired, a touch more guilty, a breath more anxious. That tiny drop in your emotional state is enough to tilt the spiritual balance in their favor. But here's the truth, they never want you to figure out that emotional exchange works both ways. If they can pull energy from you, you can stop the pull. If they can shift your emotional state, you can anchor it. If they can drain you through guilt, you can cut the cord by reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. And the moment you learn to hold your emotional ground, even for a few seconds, the entire system collapses. Their drain loses access. Their trigger loses effect. Their ritual loses power. Because the law of exchange only works on someone who doesn't know it exists. Now that you do, the game changes. But emotional theft is only the beginning. The deeper sabotage happens when your inner world is pushed out of sync, when your intention and your heart no longer speak the same language. That battle belongs to the next law, the law of alignment. Most people imagine spiritual sabotage as something loud, a sudden attack, an overwhelming fear, a shadow in the room. But the truth is far quieter and far more predictable. Witches don't wait for chaos, they wait for routine. They know you repeat the same emotional patterns every night, and that repetition creates openings. So instead of breaking your defenses, they simply use your habits to walk right through them. Think about your nightly cycle. The scrolling you do to calm your mind. The old conversations you reread even though they reopen wounds. The unresolved arguments replaying in your thoughts. The intrusive memories that hit you the moment the room gets quiet. All of these feel like normal behaviors, but to someone trained in spiritual manipulation, they are doorways. Because your routine is a map. When I was still inside those circles, we never wasted energy guessing how to weaken someone. We simply watched the predictable behaviors they repeated every night. If someone always scrolled before prayer, we'd nudge their emotions toward comparison and insecurity. If someone always revisited old texts, we'd amplify nostalgia or regret. If someone always lay awake replaying arguments, we'd feed the loops until their mind felt too heavy to rise into prayer. The goal was simple, turn their own patterns against them. And most people never questioned it. They assumed their exhaustion was natural. They thought their mental noise was random. They believed their distractions were just bad habits. But the truth is far darker. Your routines create vulnerabilities that attackers rely on. Every time you reach for the same distraction, you open the same window. Every time you revisit the same emotional wound, you create the same crack in your focus. Every time you engage the same late-night spiral, you weaken your spiritual momentum right before it matters most. But here's the part you've never been told: if a habit can be exploited, it can also be armored. When you change the pattern, you close the opening. When you shift the routine, you erase the map. When you interrupt the cycle, even once, you disrupt the entire system they've built around your predictability. This is where the sabotage begins to lose its grip. But there's a deeper mechanism at play, one far more dangerous than distraction or routine. It's when the enemy stops manipulating what you do and starts manipulating who you are inside. That battle unfolds through the next spiritual law, the law of alignment.